Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 13th of February. So coming to the first article, States of Health. Now the context here is that the NITI Aayog has recently released the first ever health index in the country. Something about this index. This index has divided all the states in the country into two groups. One is comprising of 21 big states and the second group comprises of 8 small states. Also 3 union territories is what has been analyzed. Amongst these 21 big states, the topmost state is Kerala, followed by Punjab, followed by Tamil Nadu, followed by Gujarat and then followed by Himachal Pradesh. Amongst the worst performance in this category is that of Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, Odisha and Madhya Pradesh. Amongst the 8 small states, the best performance is by Mizoram, followed by Manipur, and in the Union Territory, the best performance is by the state of Lakshadweep. So that is something about this index. Now coming to the issues which are vital in this index, the first is that of the role of states. Now here you need to understand that health delivery in the 7th schedule of the Constitution is in the state list. So it is largely the responsibility of the states to ensure efficient delivery of health services. And the center has only a guiding role here. So whenever health assessment is to be done, it was vital that the quality of health services in the states is what is discussed. So that is something that this index has encouraged and it has done. So that is something that is vital here. Another thing is that is vital is an analysis of health versus politics. Now we have discussed previously also that health is not a major political issue in this country and not many elections are won or lost on the basis of health. However, this year is a landmark year because this was the final budget of this government, the final full budget of this government. And so it was believed that this budget, the budget in the penultimate year of elections is largely considered as a very populist budget and election-oriented schemes are focused on. However, different from the previous patterns, this time the government has largely focused on health. So what this ensures is that now health is becoming a major political issue in the country. So that is something that is vital here. That is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to competitive federalism. Now as this index is bringing about a comparison between different states, it is going to promote competition in these states to ensure better outcomes. So definitely it is in the spirit of competitive federalism. Not only that, it is also in the spirit of cooperative federalism. Now, why is it in the spirit of cooperative federalism is because despite the fact that it is the state's responsibility to provide health services, it is vital that the center provides the funds for it, it provides the policy for it. So definitely cooperative federalism is also something that can be linked to in this case. So that is something that is important. Another thing is with regards to the interstate inequalities. Now this index has brought about the inequalities that exist between different states. And so it calls out for the governments to focus upon bridging these inequalities. So that is something that is important here. Another thing is with regards to the index credibility itself. Now, this index is largely based on metrics such as institutional deliveries, systematic reporting of tuberculosis, access to drugs for people suffering from HIV/AIDS, or the immunization levels and out-of-pocket expenditures. So, all of these data definitely are covered, but even the NITI Aayog itself has admitted that there is a need to increase the quality of the data, especially from the private sector. And this requires a rigorous assessment. So, only when this intense rigorous assessment is done, then the index can be completely credited as a credible index. But at present, definitely it is a good step, but definitely there is also an issue of credibility of this index. So that is something that is analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to the National Health Protection Scheme, which has been introduced in the budget of 2018. Now this is an insurance coverage scheme and definitely this scheme is going to increase the funding of these states. But what is vital is that even for the success of this particular scheme, the states have to play a major important role and they need to focus upon the preventive healthcare and the primary healthcare. So that is something that this editorial has discussed. The final opinion is, which is a vital opinion, that socialization of medicine with a reliance on taxation to fund the basic programs is the bedrock of health system in any country, and it is this policy which India too should follow. So this is something about this article. As I have mentioned previously also, health is a very important topic for this year, so that is the importance. Coming to the next article, this again is the article on health system itself, hardly a game changer. Now the context here is the recent National Health Protection Scheme under the Ayushman Bharat program, which was introduced in the budget of 2018 and 19. Now something about this scheme is going to provide an insurance cover for secondary and tertiary treatment. The insurance cover will be of rupees 5 lakh for 10 crore families. So that is something about this particular scheme. Now this article is largely a about the challenges which this scheme faces, and indeed that is the importance of this article. You can have a direct question as to what are the implementation challenges to the National Health Protection Scheme. So that is the relevance here. Now coming to the first issue, this is regarding the present scenario. Some data has been given here. The population is largely divided economically into the bottom 40% and the top 60%. Now here the author says that at present in the bottom 40%, 11.3% of the people have an insurance coverage, and in the top 60%, only 17.9% of the people have a health insurance coverage. So definitely there was a huge room for increasing the insurance coverage, and that is something that has been envisaged. Now all these 40% of the people are under the scheme. So definitely all of these 40% people now having a health insurance is a huge step, and that is something that is commendable about this scheme. So that is the first analysis. Another thing is with regards to the magnitude of the task. Now as I told you that previously only 11.3% of the people were covered. Now increasing this to 40% of the people is a hugely intense administrative task. So definitely the magnitude of the task is a huge one, and that is something that has been analyzed here. Another challenge is with regards to the high cost of the premium. Now, as I discussed previously also, that this is an insurance coverage scheme. So what is important is the government will pay for the premium of this scheme. Now, at present in the budget, the government has envisaged rupees 2,000 crore for this scheme, but according to many experts, the cost is going to go up to 8,000 crore. So definitely there is a huge gap, and this is something that needs to be bridged. The issue of cost is something that is pressing in the backdrop of rising fiscal deficit of the country. So that is something that is important here. Another thing which has been analyzed is the rate of hospitalization. Now this is some understanding which you need to develop, that whenever a person has an insurance health coverage, the rate of hospitalization of such population increases. This is through our several studies, through global experience we know this. So definitely if the insurance coverage is going to expand now to 40% of the people, then a large number of these people will now seek hospitalization care, secondary and tertiary hospitalization. So that is something that is important. So it is also vital for the government to ensure that such hospitalization care is available, because otherwise what will happen is that there's a competition between private hospitals and public hospitals. If the public hospitals are not strengthened, then the private hospitals will take over the market and the public hospitals will be rather eliminated. So that is something that is important. A case has been made that to ensure the success of this scheme, what is also important is that the government strengthens the public hospitals and ensures that a large section of these 40% of the people avail public hospital facilities. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing is with regards to an issue of reimbursement. Now here it has been seen that the reimbursement rates are low, and questions on the efficacy of this scheme is something that has been raised. Often when an insurance coverage is provided, it is the government which is supposed to reimburse the money to the insurance company. Not only this money reimbursement is often low, there is also an issue of delays in the payment of these reimbursements. So what happens is that the insurance companies get demotivated to provide insurance coverage to people under government schemes. So that is something that has been analyzed here, that this trend needs to be reversed, and efficiency in this regard is something that needs to be ensured to ensure the success of this scheme. So that is something that is important. Another important analysis is with regards to the outpatient visits. Now as we've discussed, National Health Protection Scheme is largely limited to secondary and tertiary care, which means that if a person is going to get admitted in a hospital, then he is subject to an insurance cover. However, if this person simply visits for an OPD, then in that case the insurance coverage is not provided. So what is the issue is that out-of-pocket expenditure in the country is largely about outpatient visits. That is approximately more than 80% of this out-of-pocket expenditure is for the OPDs, and this is something that the scheme has not covered. So this is one major criticism against the NHPS. That is something that you need to know. Another thing is with regards to hospital-induced demand. Now previously also we had a Rogi Swasthya Bima Yojana. Under the Rogi Swasthya Bima Yojana, we had seen that whenever the government is providing an insurance cover, what happens is that there is a hospital-induced demand, especially from the private sector. For example, there is unnecessary hospitalization. There is an increased number of diagnostic tests and surgeries which are advocated to people. We had also seen that in the case of Chhattisgarh, utrectomies were done by doctors just to claim the Rashtra Swasthya Bima Yojana insurance cover. So such kind of issues may arise, and there is an important need to regulate this. So this is something that has been analyzed, that the government needs to focus on the regulation aspect as well. So that is important. Finally, the opinion is that for providing healthcare to the bottom 40% of the population under the National Health Protection Scheme, what is vital is that the government firstly increases the budget cover, as I discussed here. Another thing is there is a need to strengthen the health infrastructure at all levels. Also, there is a need to strengthen the regulatory mechanism. So this is something that is the crux of this article. Indeed, National Health Protection Scheme is very important. So that's the relevance. Coming to the next article, let the chips fall where they may. Now the context here is with regards to the constitutional crisis in Maldives. This has largely become very, very important for India because Maldives has openly called for India, the opposition parties in Maldives, they have called for India to enter Maldives through its military and restore democracy in Maldives. So that is the relevance of this entire issue for India, and a question is definitely expected this year for this. So coming to the issues, first issue is with regard to the role of the citizens. Now here this editorial has discussed that it is the citizens of Maldives who are responsible for ensuring democracy, and this should not be the duty of any external force. So that is something that is advocated, that India's role of interfering in Maldives will not be justified because this is something that the people of Maldives have to ensure. So that is the first analysis. Another thing is with regards to the strategic interest. Now here the editorial makes a good claim where it says that India might say that it wants to interfere for restoring democracy, but that would be a false statement because inherently what is vital for India is its strategic interest in Maldives, because Maldives is a small country in the Indian Ocean region, and it is the Indian Ocean region which is of utmost strategic importance for India as well as the world. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another analysis is with regards to the small countries in the region. Now this is another good analysis here. Here the author says that traditionally also this is a trend amongst smaller countries to empower themselves. What they do is that they play the bigger powers in the region. For example, India and China are the two bigger powers in this region of the Indian Ocean. So all the smaller countries will sometimes side with India and sometimes they might side with China to get a better deal from both these countries. So this is the policy which these smaller countries are playing, and India should recognize this and should not fall prey to this. So this is something that is important. Another very important analysis is with regards to China in Maldives. Now here's something, the understanding is what is vital. You need to know that till year 2011, China did not even have an embassy in Maldives. And now China is playing a major role in Maldives, whereas India has had traditional relations with Maldives. Another thing is that in Maldives, a large part of their economy is debt to China. So the dollar diplomacy of China is very intense in Maldives. So that is something that is making Maldives much more dependent on China. That is something that is vital. Another thing is that China is planning to establish a military base in Maldives. This is not to the liking of India because this will provide China with a military base in the Indian Ocean region, and this something will be against Indian interests. So that is a major cause of concern for India. That is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to India's neighborhood policy, a newer approach has been given here. So that is something that is vital in this editorial. Here the author says that after 1947, what happened is that India considered itself as a successor state of the British Raj. Previously, under the British rule, India was the major country of British India, and as a result of which, often these smaller countries were influenced through India. However, after India's independence and after the independence of all these countries, India should have taken a backseat, but this did not happen. And India, considering itself the successor of British Raj, often interfered in the regional politics of these smaller countries. And this was not to the liking of these countries. So this is something that was India's previous policy. This, however, has changed now, and India should stick to that stand, and India should not interfere in the internal affairs of smaller countries. So that is something that is important. Another important thing which I would like to specifically mention is about the Gujarat Doctrine. A lot of issues are being raised that should the Gujarat Doctrine be raised again, because Gujarat Doctrine advocated that India should not interfere in the neighborhood affairs. So that is something that is vital. A question can be asked in this regard. Another thing that you need to know is with regards to some other global examples. Here, you need to know that wherever military intervention was made in other countries, for example, it was made by US in Iraq, Afghanistan, and also in Syria, it has been a failure. So in that light, also the author is making a claim that India should not interfere in the affairs of Maldives militarily. That is something that is important. Another thing is with regards to the factional divide in Maldives. Now here the author is saying that the present regime under the current government is also a strengthened regime, and so if it might happen that if India interferes in Maldives against this regime, so there might be a faction in Maldives who will not welcome this stand and will get against India. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another aspect is with regards to a fear of Islamist politics. Now here the author is making a claim that if India interferes, then it might give legitimacy to the present government because as we all know, the present government has started emergency in Maldives, so it might happen that they might justify that it was important to ensure an emergency because foreign countries are interfering, and not only that, it can strengthen the Islamist politics in Maldives. And this is also important because the Indian government is largely considered a Hindu-oriented right-wing government. So in that spirit also, in Islamist politics is something that can get strengthened in Maldives. So an analysis with respect to that is something that has been drawn in this editorial. That is important. Another thing which is important is with regards to Indian expatriates. Now here the author has said that there are approximately 25,000 Indian expatriates in Maldives, and they might get affected if India interferes militarily in Maldives. So definitely a case is being drawn against military intervention. Another thing is that India's any step will be a violation of the UN Charter and the international law. So definitely it is that India should not directly interfere, rather it should interfere through the UN. This is something that India is favoring also. India, China, US, all through the UN are calling for a fact-finding mission to be sent to Maldives. So that is something that has been advocated here. Another thing is that even in the past experiences where India has explicitly interfered, for example in 1971, India interfered in the then East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. Also in 1980s, India interfered in Sri Lanka. But in both these cases, explicit requests were made, and also it was something that was impacting India directly, because in 1971 India had a burden of approximately 10 million refugees. So definitely in that case somehow it could have been justified, but now any interference in Maldives cannot be justified. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Lastly, the final opinion is that India has little moral, legal and political locus standi to justify its intervention in Maldives, and India should instead opt for diplomacy and persuasion. So definitely this is the final opinion, and the article is a very, very important one because a direct question can be asked about analyzing whether or not India should directly interfere in Maldives. So that is the relevance here. Coming to the next article, now this is basically not a very important article, but some analysis is what is vital. The context first and foremost is that recently the Bombay Stock Exchange, the National Stock Exchange, the Metropolitan Stock Exchanges in India, they announced in a decision that they would stop providing data and data feed and other support to overseas exchanges that list derivatives linked to Indian stocks and indices. Now, why is it that the Indian stock exchanges have refused to share data with foreign or offshore stock exchanges? That is something that has been analyzed. But before that, something about derivatives is what you should know. Now, derivatives are, as the name suggests, they are any commodity or shares or anything else which is traded in the Indian stock markets. But the price of these things which are traded is not something based on the market prices. Rather, they are derived, and that is why they are called derivative. They are derived from an underlying asset, and this underlying asset can be a contract. For example, a commodity is to be traded, and it is to be traded after suppose 1 year, and there is a contract that after 1 year this commodity will be traded with a particular price. So the price of that commodity after 1 year, whatever might be the cost, it is not going to be based on the market price, rather it is through this contract which is there, and so it is going to be called a derivative. So that is something about derivatives. Now coming to the issues which have been analyzed, the first issue is that the Indian stock markets are complaining that there is a migration of liquidity from Indian stock markets to the offshore markets which are listing Indian derivatives. So that is definitely a cause of concern, because migration of liquidity is bound to have impacts on the stability of the economy. So that is something that is vital. Another thing is with regards to the volumes of the derivatives. Now here an analysis has been drawn that the volumes of derivatives in the Indian stock markets is comparatively much lower than what it is in the offshore markets. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to the alternative ways. Now here you need to understand that even if the Bombay Stock Exchange, the NSE, the Metropolitan Stock Exchange, all of them have said that they are not going to share data with the foreign exchange markets, it is largely not going to impact them, because they can definitely find other alternative ways to gain the data. So definitely this is not going to be a curbing on the offshore markets. So what needs to be done is something different, and that is some technical issues need to be addressed. Now what is the technical issue is that the offshore markets are trading for longer working hours compared to the Indian markets, and this is something that is more investor friendly, and as a result of which foreign investors are choosing to invest through foreign markets. So that is something that is important here. It is a technical aspect which needs to be addressed. Another thing is that countries like Singapore and Dubai, they have a lot of offshore Indian markets which are dealing with Indian derivatives also. Now these countries are largely low tax jurisdiction, so foreign investors are favoring these destinations compared to India. That is something that is important. Another thing is the derivatives in these countries, Indian derivatives in these countries are listed in dollar denomination, and this is providing a greater stability, because dollar compared to rupee is a more stable denomination. So that is something that is being followed there, and as a result of which it is more incentivizing for foreign investors. That is something that is important. Another thing is that we have recently discussed many articles about the recently introduced long-term capital gains tax along with a securities transaction tax. So there is a double taxation regime in India. This is also a disincentive for foreign investors to invest through Indian markets. So that is something that is important. Also, the SEBI recently gave a decision where it said that it restricted foreign investment in domestic future markets. This is a limitation only in India, and this is not a limitation in foreign markets. So definitely foreign investors are getting attracted to invest in Indian derivatives through foreign markets. So this is the entire controversy. Though a direct question is rarely expected, but one can definitely ask that what are the challenges that are faced by the stock markets in India? If that is there, then all of these are in line with the challenges which Indian stock markets are facing. So that is something that is important. And the final opinion is that there is a need to address these structural problems rather than these knee-jerk reactions like not sharing data. So that is something that is the opinion here. Now, some questions based on today's discussion. I hope you can attempt all of these questions based on our discussion itself. Please try and attempt them in a word limit of 150 words. So with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow.